Hello, welcome to my channel, I Can Know the Truth. My name is Ryan Conlon, and today I'm going to be explaining why choice is necessary for valid reasoning. So, basically, I would say the place to start is looking at the law of non-contradiction. So, in order to be able to know the truth, in order to have valid reasoning, you have to be able to at least entertain the possibility of making an error. And so basically, if you don't have control over this process at all, you can't know the truth. So I think the reason people often think reasoning, like valid reasoning, there's no freedom to it, right? People think it's just you either follow the rules correctly or you don't. But if you were just following the rules deterministically, you wouldn't know the truth. You'd be performing an operation, but that wouldn't be the same as knowing the truth. Knowing the truth does require you to be able to make mistakes and to be able to understand why something would be impossible, like what would go wrong if it was this option rather than that option, and things like that. So it's not just rule following to reason. You don't actually have a reason if it's just a rule that you're applying. That's not in and of itself a reason for anything. You have to connect that rule to something in reality. Otherwise, it doesn't count as a reason to actually conclude anything. So, yeah, here's another angle on that is if the fact that you've made mistakes at all, if those were forced on you in any way, then you can't really claim that the universe we live in isn't a structure where truth is really knowable. It's one where errors are like literally forced on you. And then I guess here's another angle is randomness. I talked about this in other videos, but randomness would completely destroy valid reasoning. Because they wouldn't represent anything, like your samples or your probes or your measurements. They wouldn't be reliable. And I guess this is harder to see for experiments in the world, but mentally, I guess this becomes obvious. When you are considering something, when you're sort of holding up two options in your mind, or you're holding up a whole bunch of options in your mind, if those were at all random, they wouldn't tell you anything. You couldn't act on them. And so there'd be no point to random probes. You wouldn't be able to use them for anything. So, okay, back to choice. Here's the other angle. So that was sort of an epistemological angle, but there's also an ontological side to choice. In order to explain change at all, you need choice, because determinism describes a static, fixed structure. So, an interesting thing is our universe is backwards deterministic and forwards non-deterministic. In other words, the past, the present state, means the entire past as a fixed thing. It's determined. The past is determined by the present, but the future isn't determined by the present. So that's the reason I bring that up, is to understand what determinism actually describes, which is not a changing thing. Once you have a deterministic system, it's describing something that's just fixed. So I think this also explains a lot of intuition, like the flawed human intuition, which is basically applying this deterministic backwards facing logic, and applying it everywhere. And it kind of makes sense. The entire past, according to CFEP, the entire past, every event leading up to right now, is described by the way things are right now. So, in other words, a good way to put it is the universe at any given state is the simplest model which deterministically generates every one of its own necessary preconditions. So it computes its own, it deterministically, not, I guess it doesn't compute it, but it represents, it deterministically implies its own foundations. So back to choice. So a determinist, so basically in the past you can't choose. The past is fixed, so there's no choice there. And then so you need non-determinism, in other words, to explain change. To explain change, you need like a gradually collapsing distribution. There's many outcomes, many possible outcomes, and they're gradually being pruned away. And so you need non-determinism to even describe that, because it has to be possible. Like, let's say you have some order of things. If A implies B, implies C, implies D, and so on, then A falls, like you have dominoes. A falls means Z falls. They lay down together if it's deterministic. The only way to have it be possible for B to be down and for Z to not be down is if B does not necessarily imply Z. So has to be non-determinism. So then people say, well, why not randomness? That isn't an ontological resource that we have. Randomness describes uncertainty. It's just equally weighted outcomes. So you can't use randomness to explain it. There's one outcome happens. There's more than one outcome that could have happened. One outcome occurred. Why wasn't it this one? Why was it this one? That saying randomness isn't an answer, and it doesn't explain it. It's just, it just doesn't explain it at all. Saying randomness, but saying choice, it at least connects it to something which we have, which we have available as a resource, as an explanatory resource. So, ontologically, choice is needed for valid reasoning, so that we can even explain the experience of choice, the experience of change, but also for reasoning to be valid, you have to be able to at least consider making errors intentionally. You have to be able to consider experimentations, and you be able to have valid reasoning. You do need to be able to explore the universe you're in, and try things out. And so if you're at all determined by the universe, or if you're being controlled by it like that, you wouldn't have valid measurements and all kinds of things like that. You could never ever conclude that you don't have free will. Whatever you treated as a reason to conclude you don't have free will, you might as well treat that as a reason to believe that you don't have valid reasoning, which, very self-defeating.